Welcome to the All About You podcast. My guest today is Alexey, who by trade is a journalist and writer, but he has now added the host of stand-up comedy Valencia to his list of achievements. Alexey, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much. Thrilled to be here.
Now, Alexey, let's start with your career, journalism and writing. Do you think that had an impact on the stand-up comedy? Was that a bit of a jumping off platform?
No, I think stand-up maybe. I think I've been trying to do stand-up in everything that I do, just not call it that. And so it felt like homecoming to say, actually, let's just do stand-up. Being a journalist and a writer by trade really helps with stand-up because stand-up is all about connecting dots in an unusual way. Yeah, we all see the patterns, but then a comedian, to make us laugh or to make a point, would connect the dots in an unusual way. And that's also what journalism is, finding the facts and stringing them together. So I think there's a very natural overlap.
When you were like a kid or a teenager, did everybody tell you were funny and good at telling stories?
Yes and no. I think that I do have a clear memory of making people laugh when I was very little, and it's a standard kid fare of like cursing. You know, when nobody expects little kids to curse well, but I was a very good cursor, so I guess I liked that. I was always a curious kid and putting my nose where it didn't belong and trying to find out more and more and more about something. So I didn't hear a lot that I was funny. I heard a lot, it's none of your business. That's probably the road there.
Because I always think there are two types of people. They're the people that can tell jokes and funny stories, and then there's people like me who cannot. Do you agree with that?
Yes and no. It's a very journalistic statement. I'm like, yes and, right? So stand-up, on one hand, it's a skill set, right? There's a formula for how to write a joke or for how to tell a story, your premise, your punchline, all of that. People who are successful at it maybe have a bit of a natural inkling to it, and then they put in the work of the day in and day out and perfecting the skill. I don't think that there are people who can't tell a joke. I think there are people that could use a little stand-up comedy class to maybe tell better jokes.
Because if we think about it, we're talking about people that find it quite natural to tell a joke or a funny story, and others that maybe not quite so much. The number one fear is public speaking.
Correct.
And standing on stage, doing stand-up comedy is about the jokes and the stories, but standing in front of people under a spotlight on your own, that's a biggie.
Now that you said it, I think I'm afraid now. I think I'm reconsidering my life choices at this very moment. I think you're right in saying that it's a little bit different. People who are funny in their friend group or like the class clown, the family reunion, jokester, it's different from getting up in front of a paid audience or just a large crowd and telling jokes with the spotlight on you. Because of the difference in expectation. Yeah, we expect jokes from comedians and the kind of the class clown that's just a bonus. So to that extent, I always say that going to a stand-up comedy show, it's a little bit like going to TED Talk / like humiliation kink videos. You know, it's a combination of somebody that is being very vulnerable by getting up there, but they're also trying to communicate some truth to you. Yeah, they're trying to share truth about themselves and the world. So it's an art form that comes with great vulnerability, but the more successful comics are more open, and the connection with the audience is in that vulnerability.
So let's talk about stand-up comedy. Has there been a resurgence about stand-up comedy? It seems to be out there a bit more now. I mean, I know you're doing things, so we're going to talk about what you're doing in Valencia.
Yeah, I brought stand-up comedy back single-handedly.
You have. Well, no, because all of a sudden it's out there, and I know you're very, very busy, and obviously we are going to cover that. But I just think it seemed to have disappeared for a while. And now it seems to be sort of coming back as if old school interconnection with somebody on a stage and an audience. And I always think with comedy, the funniest thing about comedy is like what I call life comedy. The stupid things we do, we say
Yes.
every single day. To me, those are the funniest. So let's talk about comedy in Valencia.
We're living through another golden age of comedy right now, and that happened thanks to internet and social media. And whereas before, to do stand up, especially stand up in English, right, you had very smaller markets. You had United States, Canada, England, right, Australia, so English speaking countries. Now, with globalization and people moving all over the world and people being able to work remotely and commerce generally globalizing, English language is much more ubiquitous around the world, and people who speak English are living elsewhere all over the world. So that creates an environment where comedy comes in to bring these people together in a very natural way. When we do comedy in Valencia, I would say most of the audience and most of the comedians, English is not the first language, right? So it's a common language. So with social media now, a lot of comedians from anywhere in the world, you can put your jokes on TikTok, you can put your jokes on Twitter, you can put your jokes wherever, or do open mics that are in the cities, and you can find and reach your audience. Whereas before, if you wanted to do stand-up in English, well, you better find your way to an English-speaking country, spend the years in the clubs, blah, 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 blah. So the renaissance of comedy now is that it's a really democratic art form. Like we said in the beginning, it's just you and the mic, or sometimes no mic at all, right? So it's just you telling your truth, hopefully in a funny way. And more people are responding to that. So there is a kind of reemergence of stand-up comedy as a globally popular art form. When it comes to Valencia, I've been producing stand-up comedy events since February 2024, so about a year and a half now. And then there's another, my fellow producer, Kata, who's been producing events roughly for about the same time. So we started roughly at the same time. So in my case, stand-up in Valencia for me happened, I wanted to do it. I've been looking for ways to do it myself as a comic. I knew that probably in Barcelona and Madrid, they have open mic nights. There's a bit more community there. So I thought maybe I can go and visit. Then I had organized a Turia walk for people. I think it was maybe Christmas or New Year's, for people who wanted just have a nice long walk in Turia Park, beginning to end, meet new people. Maybe we don't all have 12 cousins to spend holidays with. In that walk, I overheard someone else talking about that they just came from months in Barcelona where they could go and see stand-up comedy almost every night in English, and they can't find it in Valencia. So I thought, oh, okay. So I just barged into the middle of that conversation and I said, I'm also looking for that. So let's maybe exchange information and see if we can find something better together. This person's name was Phil, and Phil and I exchanged information. And then within just days, there was an Excel spreadsheet of the venues that have ever hosted stand-up comedy. We decided okay, well, he can tell jokes, I can tell jokes. That's already 2 comedians. We trust that there's got to be at least 1 or 2 others. So we put together very quickly an event on Meetup, just a stand-up comedy open mic. And what was amazing, we didn't know how it would go, but in the end, I think we had 5 comedians and over 80 people came in the audience. So we thought, oh, there is a niche here. And so then Phil's work took him elsewhere around the world. Shout out to Phil. And we were left behind with this newly found niche of stand-up comedy in Valencia that we've been cultivating now for a year and a half with my colleagues. And it really has been amazing to watch it grow. It really has been on a growth path, both in terms of audiences finding it, the comedians finding Valencia when they plan their tours, when they consider where to go in Spain to perform. And it's just been a really eye-opening and a wonderful experience.
I'm a great believer, as in, if you get an idea in your head, if that is meant to happen, you will have a chance meeting, something will come across your radar, something will happen. And I think this is a classic example. You were doing a walk and not connected with comedy at all. You overheard a conversation. Oh my God, these are my people. And that first event, 80 people, 5 comedians. I love that. I'm a great believer in the stars aligning.
It was exactly that. It's that, strike it while it's hot, all of these cliches. It really felt that way. To the extent where we had decided, we picked a date and announced the date of the open mic without a venue. We just were so confident that, okay, we're going to do it, and then we just have to find a venue. A little problem, right? So, and then as we already started, people started to RSVP that they're interested. People started to contact us. Oh my God, I want to participate. Still no venue. And it was like within the last week or so before the event that I reached out to someone who a friend of a friend saw post somewhere else about stand-up, blah, 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 blah. I said, oh, we're planning this event. It's going great. We just don't have a venue. And the person responded, oh, I am the venue. I am somebody who loves stand-up, and I just opened a new place, and I'm looking for stand-up in my venue. So it literally was like that. And then our first open mic happened in this really lovely wine bar, Defecto, in the Botanical area. And we collaborated with them for quite some time. So it was a very organic, it had this feeling of this is something that wants to happen. Not that only we want it to happen, that it wants to happen itself. So it really felt like being a conduit more than an organ.
Let's talk about the audience at that first event. Were they young people? Were they expats? Were they Spanish living here? Who were your audience?
So the first audience is lost to time. We don't know. I'm joking. The first audience, and I think what we've been seeing with the audience is it skews younger, but not like early 20s, so kind of maybe late 20s, early 30s. However, both in terms of comedians on stage and the audience, it literally is teenagers all the way into the 80s. Like, it's the full spectrum. Because again, stand-up is the most democratic art form, right? And anybody getting up on stage brings their perspective. And honestly, I love that about it, because it's not only like 20-year-olds with boyfriend-girlfriend jokes, right? Humor is much more than that. Life is much more than that. Perspectives matter. Cultures matter, all of that. So the audience, I think, is mostly expat or folks that are here in a kind of transient way. This is Valente is a stage of their life. But we also get, I would guess, maybe 15 to 20% are local Valentians that are either coming with friends or just want to practice their English or want to kind of open themselves up to that part of the world and that type of culture. Also stand-up. A lot of people watch stand-up on Netflix or YouTube, and then they go, oh, I can also just go and see it live, right? Because we're used to rock concerts, we're used to different types of things, and you go, I've never been to a stand-up event before. I've only seen it on YouTube, clips and bits. And so there's a lot of curiosity, just how does that type of event work? Because it is a different type of event from other performances.
One thing I wanted to ask you, Alexey, you're from the States.
Like almost an honorary American. I spent 12 years there.
I'm from the UK. It seems that there is a big difference between American comedy and British comedy. We like our comedy quite sarcastic, quite dry, quite curt. American, how would you define American comedy?
I think, first of all, comedy right now is going through a major redefinition all across the board. After various social movements, sort of what is and isn't appropriate to joke about, in whose mouth, from which perspective. There's a lot. It's a very organic art form. In general, I think that American comedy is more freewheeling in a sense that they've invented ways to popularize and monetize it. Like American comedians, they play stadiums, right? So Spanish comedians or other it's only the Americans really that play the stadiums at that level. So But I think what we see in Valencia and the community of comedians that we have here, or when comedians are coming through Valencia and participating in our events, there's something maybe emerging as like a global sense of humor, because when you walk into a room, you have 100 people in the room in the audience. They're, let's say, from 18 countries, 4 different generations. How are you going to make all of them laugh? This old-fashioned idea that I'm coming in with my experiences and I'm only going to share to people like me. Well, a person like me, that definition doesn't quite exist anymore, maybe, or what we share, what connects us is no longer just where we're from, right? So I think comedy is changing. It's opening more and more to different people's experiences, to maybe even being more critical than before, because it's not just knock-knock jokes, right? It's also speaking truth to power, talking about difficult subjects, and finding humor in the insanity of the times we live in.
If we talk about you doing stand-up comedy and organising stand-up comedy nights, how do you go about preparing for when you're going to go on stage and you're going to entertain people? How do you plan that? You said there's a bit of a formula. How does that work?
Well, it depends. So if I'm hosting, I'm a host, right? So I need to have prepared the opening act, so to say, right? I need to welcome people in, bring everybody on board, have a couple jokes that kind of test the room, level the room, make sure that we're all in this together. And then I bring on the different comedians and kind of segue them in between. And in that case, I prepare some jokes, or I look sort of what is happening on the day that I can make a quick reference to that we all would be familiar with. With comedians and introductions of them, I often either play a part of like a hype man, right? So I gotta hype up the next comedian come to the stage. Or sometimes also I have to play the role of being on the audience's side and saying, well, that folks didn't work, but next one might, so it's on the comedian side, there's a camaraderie because we know we're not always all going to have a great night, right? We're going to test material that's not going to work, and that's part of the job, part of the gig. So with hosting, I have to understand sort of whose side am I on in order to move the show along. In the stand-up that I do, if I'm participating in other people's events or working on my own material, there I think it's evolving from my own experience as a person who, before coming to Valencia, I had like 24 addresses in 20 years. I was very, very mobile and all over the place. So I have that experience, and then trying to make sense of being more stationary and rooted here and falling in love with Valencia, and how do you become a local. And I always say local is a verb. Local is about doing things. It's about becoming part of something, and it takes action and effort. And so reflecting on that. And then, as I always say, and also dick jokes. That's you can't get all high and mighty without the dick jokes. So a balance of those things is kind of what I aim for.
And then, do you go and see the comedians that you're planning to have to your event? Do you go and watch them at another event, or get them to send you a
no. So it's a decision that I had made pretty much from the very first event on, that because stand-up is probably the most democratic art form we have in performance, it also has to be the most free. Like, freedom of speech is fundamental to stand-up. And part of that is I am not the gatekeeper for the truth. I am not the gatekeeper for what is funny. I am not the arbiter of taste in that, right? Because part of producing stand-up events is that you have a number of comedians sharing the evening, which is on purpose, because then as an audience, you're not going to find everybody hilariously funny, right? The idea is that, the hope is that some of the comedians will kind of elicit maybe a smile from you, or maybe will offend you a little bit, so your blood pressure goes up. That's also healthy for circulation. And then maybe someone on the night will actually give you a belly laugh, and then you had a great experience, as far as I'm concerned, right? So I never ask to see people's things in advance. If somebody reaches out and goes, I would love to give it a try, I go, fantastic, these are open slots on these shows, we can put you in. I never look ahead of time what else they have on their Instagrams or what else they're doing, because to me, that doesn't matter because stand up is a very immediate art form, right? You can have hilarious jokes on YouTube, but tonight you're going to get up in front of people with new things and none of it is going to work, right? Or the opposite. Maybe your clips on TikTok are not representative of your new era. You have a different character or you, et cetera, et cetera. So I never look in advance because it's not open mic. It's not open mics are produced. It's not open in the sense of like walk up, like show up, walk up, right? It's open in the sense that I schedule people into it, but I don't censor who gets to do what, right? And in the end, it's the audience that decides because the audience is the one that has the power to boo the comedian, has the power to heckle the comedian. Well, I never. Just generally, please don't heckle or boo the comedians. They're also just trying to do their job. But in the extreme case, the audience has the ultimate tool of judgment, and that's laughter. If the audience is laughing, we're good. If the audience is not laughing at anything the comedian is saying, the comedian also will automatically know maybe I need to wrap up my 5 minutes and rethink my life choices, right? So,
one thing I wanted to ask you, Alexey, most of the comedians you're working with now, are they generally men?
It's a great question. So historically and unfortunately now, stand-up comedy is more of a male-dominated field. And this separate podcast on effects of patriarchy on the arts, right? So, but that is also changing. And like Kata, my arch nemesis, the other producer of, we call each other arch nemesis even though we're friends and we do each other's shows. She produces her events in Valencia. There's a number of comedians kind of on a circuit that we have in Valencia who are fantastic, hilarious women. We also hosted one night where it was women-only comedians. So it's changing, even though if you look at number of people that are doing it more consistently or more professionally in terms of like investment of time, it does still skew towards men for a variety of socio-cultural reasons.
Well, I was going to say to you, why do you think that is? I mean, my theory is maybe the standing up on the stage on your own, maybe a lot of women are not that comfortable with that as opposed to men. Maybe they think someone's going to look at what I'm wearing, my figure, my shape, my hairstyle, whatever. I just wonder if women would feel they're going to get a lot of judgment on their appearance, let alone what they're delivering.
First of all, as a man, I can't speak to that experience or kind of theorize what that could be like. I can only imagine that the bar, like the internal bar to clear to asking for public space to listen to yourself speak is higher for women than for men historically, right? And that comes from seeing sort of who historically is on television or in other public spaces, taking up space talking, and how that trickles down, et cetera, et cetera. I think we're seeing now younger generation of comedians who are women coming in, just really being hilarious and boldly taking that space and being very mindful of playing with those audience expectations and kind of knocking that right off the bat, going, you can look at this, that, and the other, but moving on, right? So I think this next generation of women comedians is going to really, really change the art form, and it's a really long overdue switch to something that's much more inclusive and humane and hysterical at the same time.
Because I should imagine there is quite a big divide in what women find funny and what men find funny. And I guess if you're a female, you get up on that stage and you can quickly see, okay, my audience is 20% female here. They may have to very quickly reshuffle through their index in their brain and maybe change something.
I think in Valencia we have a number of women sort of starting their careers in stand up or pursuing that direction. There's Cynthia and Kata and Jane and Maria and Barbara, and they're doing really, really very interesting things. Very diverse. Also, I feel like the gendering of comedy now is not that it's like a thing of the past whatsoever, right? Because patriarchy and all these things are not a thing of the past, but there's a greater freedom now in coming in and saying that I am this person, this is my gender identity, but I'm going to talk about things that don't relate to that, right? Because senses of humor are different, but also it's not that all like women jokes are domestic sector, right? Or all men jokes are sexual conquest, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then additionally, the lens of when people come on stage and they go, for example, we had a comedian, Mohammed, and he was like, who here is an Arabic speaker, right? Okay, that's going to skew things, right? And then you discover, oh, in this room, actually, no one is, right? Or you come on stage and comedians who are black and they go, who in the audience has that experience, right, or that identity. Okay, this is Valencia. The room is going to look a certain way, one way or the other, right? So, and then finding ways to either incorporate that or just go forth regardless. So I think identity politics in stand-up comedy, it's a fascinating subject because it both powers the humor or the personality of the performer, but can also hinder someone if you kind of decide to make that the whole niche, like, oh, I'm a Russian guy and therefore 99% of my jokes are Russians are like this and potato, you can pigeonhole yourself there. So that said, I think overall, yes, women in comedy, other diasporas that are not necessarily Nordic should and need to have bigger space in stand-up comedy. We also have been produced a number of LGBTQ comedy nights. So kind of queer comedy is a whole other niche, a whole other lens that you bring to the world. And again, it's about sensitivity, right? It's not that every comedian who identifies on that rainbow spectrum is going to go up there with their sex jokes, right? Or their gay jokes or whatever. But it's about a sensitivity and an angle. Like I said in the beginning, right? It's how do you connect those dots, right? What kind of pencil do you use to connect those dots? So I think there's a lot of room to grow in terms of welcoming different identities to the stand-up tentpole. But I think that work is happening and that process, the art form is changing.
There's a lot going on in the world of comedy, isn't there? I think that was so interesting what you were saying there. Alexey, what makes you laugh?
So I'm actually quite easy to make laugh because to me, laughter is the best medicine for mental health, for example, because if you can't laugh at certain situations, you give them way too much power, and we're living such an insane time with so many mental health challenges and demands on our attention and our spirit that humor to me is the antidote to the zeitgeist. So I'm ready, willing, and able to laugh at almost anything.
I mean, one thing I heard from a comedian, I can't remember who it was now, it was observational comedy, and he said, when you go to the supermarket and you've got all the bags of salad and things like that, he said, you don't pick the ones at the front, you go right to the back, dislocating your shoulder to get the one at the back. You don't even look at the date, you just think the one at the back is the one I want. And when he said this, everybody was laughing. And
Because
every
that's
time
what we
I
do,
go
yes.
and pick a bag of salad, as soon as my arm goes to the back, I think of that. To me, that is observational comedy. Whether that is the correct term, I've no idea. But to me, that is everyday life, and that's what I do. And that's what 90% of the people will do.
Yeah.
It could be exactly the same as the bag at the back as at the front, but we think we're getting a better deal because we're taking the one.
Because we think we know better. Right?
Yeah,
we're thinking we're
absolutely.
getting one up on the system.
Yeah, absolutely. We're beating the supermarkets at their own game. But for me, observational comedy is the best.
For me, observational comedy, where it meets intercultural global realm. The comedians that I personally love the most, that like my North Stars, would be someone like Trevor Noah, the South African comedian, Indian comedian Veer Das. They to me do like really, really excellent work at having that observational humor, but then being able to place it into kind of historical or intercultural context where you understand something about the world. Yeah, it's not just that, oh, we all think we're like that, but that there's something bigger there at play. And comedians have this uncanny ability to, through laughter, bring cultures together, right? For me, like the bridge that's built of laughter is the shortest distance between. Because if you can manage to make us laugh, then we've discovered something fundamentally, uniquely sane about ourselves. And there's no turning back from that. Yeah.
So what was the last thing that made you laugh?
Well, any cat video that, I'm again, it's like I probably should have some higher standards for myself.
But there are millions of people who love all that.
It's like, or like cats slipping on things. I think it's that. I think like my Instagram has just really got me down, for the algorithm. So yeah, it's very, very easy.
I mean, I noticed one thing on YouTube Shorts, you're getting these fail videos.
Mm-hmm.
And some people must spend an awful lot of time. And I think half the time, did he just happen to be in that place where that happened? Or was that, okay, we're going to make a fail video?
Yeah.
I have no idea.
Sometimes it's a little too orchestrated to be a fail video. Like, yeah. Once it's, people know, okay, it's a genre, this gets clicks and views, let's fail more. Which, in general, I'm a big fan of failure. So I think failure also is almost synonymous with stand-up, because to arrive at that joke, that, like, at the wording that's going to get people, you have to fail a whole lot of times in not getting it quite right. Unfortunately, there's no way to do it other than in front of people. So public failure, you talk about public speaking being number one fear. I think public failure is number two probably. And so here you have the combination of those things. It's not only that you're going to talk in public, you are most likely going to fail. And fail audibly and undeniably, So, but then you're going to recalibrate, come back again, and then next time get that wording, and people are going to love it, and they're going to discover some beautiful truth.
So is there anything that you have done that was just day-to-day life but ended up being funny?
You mean something that finds its way into stand-up?
Just something that's happened to you. I mean, just for example, I remember years and years and years ago, walking down the road, wearing sunglasses, but one lens had fallen out. And every time I tell this story, people say, didn't you notice? And I went, no. But why did nobody tell me? And I just, even now I look back on that and it's like, slap the forehead. How did I not notice, and how could I have been so stupid? And I bet everybody was laughing at me. And I've never forgotten that.
And it sounds like I can just see that in a film made of your life. That's right in the trailer. It starts that way. Opening credits, and there you are, close up with one lens out. Yes, absolutely. That's a defining moment. I love that. That's beautiful. Everyday things do find their way into stand-up, or stand-up helps you find these funny things. I use in stand-up, for example, it's a true story. First time I went to Paris, this is now many years ago, and I went to get a coffee, and they brought those tiny little French coffees. Now, my coffee socialization is American. So it's big cups, you probably have to
keep it coming.
Keep it coming. You have to hold it with 2 hands. That's how big it is, So when that was brought in, I literally sat there and I thought, are they going to bring water? Or like, what's the catch here, right? So, and then I saw people knocking them back, and I thought, okay, well, when in Rome or when in Paris, right? So I knocked it back, and it did nothing. So then I decided in my, this is probably, I was in college, so whatever, 19, 20, 21. in my mind, I decided, so I'll just do the volume equivalent, right? So if like a Starbucks cup, so I literally had like 6 or 7 espressos in a row. And again, why did that place keep serving them? To me, remains a mystery. I mean, it was a busy place, and they probably were just, putting them out. So I ended up having like 6 espressos in a row, and then nearly a heart attack walking around Paris. Self-induced anxiety attack, Yeah, just didn't know better.
I think the restaurant were toying with you.
Yeah.
I think they go, okay, he thinks, he's used to his bucket of coffee.
Let him have it.
Let him, we'll just show him. Yeah, we'll just show him. Yeah, they probably laughed all the way through the restaurant on that one. Yeah. I mean, this is the thing, isn't it? When you're in the arena of presenting stand-up comic as well as doing it yourself, are you always like on alert? You've got to keep a little notebook and pen with you, and you see something, I'm just going to jot that down. I think that could be used in the future. Are we all targets for a future show? I guess is what I'm asking. Not me personally, of course.
I think that everybody decides for themselves. There's a lot of comedians where their almost entire shtick, is their family life, right, or their love life, and so you kind of decide what those boundaries are for you. I think for me, if there's something really genuinely funny that happens in like a personal relationship, I might ask if I can use that, or I would reshape it into like a story I heard from friends, like to kind of
protect the innocent.
Exactly, to protect the innocent. Yes, unless the innocent are like positions of power, and then after
they get it
exactly right. So that comes
they get what they deserve.
Exactly, that comes with the territory. So a lot of comedians say that it's the line is there. Are you punching up or punching down, right? Because if you're punching up with your jokes, making fun of the sort of somebody that's in some way or status or whatever above you, that's fair game. If you feel like you're punching down on somebody who cannot speak up for themselves or doesn't deserve it, then that's not. But yeah, I think you find that boundary for yourself. With relationships, I kind of joke about I'm in a relationship with a person, and it's really difficult for me to say, but I'm dating in my age range, and kind of taking that as a joke, and going into what's it like to date in the same age realm, and that is generally about the subject, and it's about my experience of it, right? It's not about the other person. For me, best stand-up comes when a person starts it with I was there, I did this, I'm the idiot, or like I'm the savior, when it's self-reflective, because that I lets us see ourselves in it. Comedy that goes, well, you people. Sometimes it can work. You can find a funny in that, but generally that works less because then our defenses go up, right? If we're listening to somebody share a personal story, we'll go, oh my goodness, me too, right? I've been there, I get that. But if we're telling the same story from a perspective of you, the defenses go up. We go, you don't know me, or oh my God, how do you know that? So not everything and everybody is material. But at the same time, if something so obviously is, then
it's going to be used.
Yes.
So they always say, if you can't laugh at yourself, you can't laugh at anybody else. And I think that is 100%. Hence, privy to my sunglass story.
Yeah.
What should I have asked you? Have I missed anything glaringly obvious in this?
I don't know, if maybe not in a question form, no. I think the only other thing that I would want to make sure that I wanted people to know with stand-up comedy in Valencia is that over this year and a half, it was the most impressive thing for me to see was the live creation of community, the coming together of people over and over, and that snowball growing, people getting to know each other, meeting at shows, then later, because I welcome everybody in who comes to the shows, I get to see people go, oh, I know you from before. Can I sit with you this time? Well, next time they come in together, right? Or they bring friends, etc. Or with the establishment of these open mics as a regular thing, because now between Kada, myself, and there's a comedy night in Ruzafa, and so between all the different producers of stand-up, there is a stand-up comedy night almost every week in Valencia on rotation somewhere. So that also means that more people are seeing it, more people are willing to try. Like I said, we're going to have quite a few people try it for the first time in June at Batisfera. That means they've come to the show, they've seen it, they saw, okay, this is a safe enough space. I can trust the host, I can trust the audience. I'm going to take that leap of faith. That to me is the greatest achievement of that people feel safe enough to stupidly volunteer themselves for this experience, right? But the second element of it is in January of this year, we held a stand-up fundraiser marathon at Fábrica de Hielo for volunteers working on Dana relief.
Which was the floods we had in Valencia, yeah.
Yes. So in October we had the floods, and there was a great outpouring of volunteers, great outpouring of people raising money, going to help. Literally everybody I know on the comedy creative side have gone there themselves and done at least something for somebody. All were involved. It was a very moving time to be in Valencia. Now, when that happened, I knew that stand-up is one of the ways that people come together. It comes with tickets. We can raise some money this way. Obviously, to schedule a stand-up fundraiser immediately after a tragedy doesn't quite work because now is not the time for jokes, right? So even though the jokes are not necessarily about it, but just the vibe, right? So we scheduled our fundraiser for January, and Fábrica de Hielo very generously volunteered their space and their technicians, etc. And we worked with a group named Batallón Giri, which was a group of volunteers organized by expats as well, expats that live in the affected area themselves, right? We put together this 3-hour fundraiser marathon with over 20 comedians participating. I don't even know how many people came through, like hundreds of people came through that night. And we raised almost 3,000 euros for these volunteers which in Spain, that doesn't quite have the like personal philanthropy culture as it would in like United States or other places. 3,000 euros, it's a really lot of money. So we raised that, and that money goes directly immediately to the volunteers. We did not gatekeep any of those transactions. And then those volunteers take it directly to the communities where they live for cleanup, for getting the new windows to people. And what I loved about that experience was this is expat comedians performing for expat audience, for expat volunteers, that ultimately helps the people of Valencia, because that's our way of saying we're also here, right? We care, we belong, we can do things, we can put our hands and feet into the cleanup, but we can also use our skill set to do it this way. And it was a great testament to me as an organizer that even within a year of doing stand-up, we were able to create a large enough community to pull off an event like that. So that is another beautiful thing that comes out of this experience that has nothing to do with senses of humor, has nothing to do with jig jokes or cancel culture, all of these other things that float around stand-up comedy in general. This was just people coming together to have a good time and use it to help somebody going through a hard time. And that is also the power of stand-up.
I think that is a fantastic story to demonstrate bringing people together under a common umbrella of comedy, but the power of the people, the audience, the comedians participating, and you all working together for an amazing cause. I mean, I hope you've given yourself a huge pat on the back. As you say,
the biggest pat on the back. No, just
absolutely no, because £3,000 or €3,000, I should say, for a lot of people may not sound a lot of money, but it is.
Like, the joking aside, it's really needed effort that will continue to be needed for a really long time to come, because the way the communities were devastated, a lot of people are still dealing with very immediate after effects, right? So it's not about just rebuilding buildings, it's about rebuilding lives there. And €3,000, you can visit Batallón Giri Patreon page or GoFundMe page or their Instagram to see that money. It's not a lot of money, but it's money that replaces somebody's windows after they've been spending most of their winter without a window. that's immeasurable difference, right? Or getting new floors into somebody's house to make it accessible and livable again. So it's not about the exact amount of money. It's about that money makes a very, very exact difference in people's lives. Yes.
And I think just to sort of round this conversation up, comedy is about finding your tribe. Comedy is about putting yourself out there and trying it. Comedy is making connections with other comedians or meeting people in the audience, and friendship grows. And it's keeping you busy. You can't get up to much mischief while you're organising all the comedy events.
I try. But it's true. Thank you very much for having this conversation about stand-up. Last thing that I think about stand-up is it's the best way I have found for you, for anybody, to rewire our brains, right? Whatever it is that you need to, like neuroplasticity, all these things we talk about, new brain cells, new wavelength, come to a stand-up comedy show because it shows you the world in a way you're unaccustomed to seeing. When you see several comedians in a row, it really expands your horizons of how to look at the same thing in so many different ways. You are literally at any stand-up comedy show, you are actively rewiring your brain, which is what we need to do for survival in these times of change and upheaval we live through. So as I had already said, for me, stand-up comedy, it's healing and it's a great, great platform for change. So I hope folks give it a chance.
And I know it's a very old cliche, but laughter is the best medicine.
There we go. Correct.
Alexey, thank you so much for being a guest on the podcast. And it's been a really interesting conversation because I think often we sit there and go, oh yeah, it's a good comedian. We don't realise what goes into it.
It's not all dick jokes. It's about 70% dick jokes, but the other 30%, there's quite a lot there. Yes, correct.
Brilliant.
Thank you very much for having me. It's been a pleasure and a privilege, and I look forward to seeing you and your audience at the stand-up comedy shows.
And I will put a link to all the things you're doing. I know you're based in Valencia, but, have comedy will travel, Alexey.
There we go.
Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed the conversation with Alexey. Please subscribe for future episodes on whatever platform you use. It is free. And please feel free to share this podcast and let's spread the joy of comedy. And if you have a story to tell, please contact me on allaboutyoupodcast@yahoo.com and let's tell your story.